This is a presentation for people who are wanting to get involved with microbiome analysis, who are programmers and not microbiologists. This is focused for trying to introduce to a programmer some of the concepts that they are going to have to face and deal with, and the challenges and the interesting computing issues that are needed to be done. So our ultimate goal is to improve people's health by understanding and modifying the gut microbiome. New techniques and rapid changes in our understanding of the microbiome disease are driving this field forward, and it is an exploding field with a massive amount of venture capital coming into it. So our agenda is basically consisting of a few parts. First of all, trying to understand what our end game is, what the outcome of building the systems you're going to be working on is intended to be. Then I'll give you some analogies, because most of you have probably done very few, if any, courses of biology or microbiology. Then I'm going to give some analogies dealing with things which hopefully you are a little bit familiar with. Then we go on to one of the challenges, which is the uncertainty effect. If you're doing an accounting system, you've got $5, you've got €5, you've got 5 rubies or whatever, and everything is very much certain. If you're dealing with a production system, you're dealing with units, all of which are certain and defined and easy to deal with. Here we are not dealing with such certainty or such concreteness. We are dealing with actually having uncertainty about almost everything, which means having to look at the problem slightly differently. And then we could look at the issue of doing analysis of symptom associations. We do not know what causes which symptoms. We can, using statistics, machine learning, etc., identify things which are likely associated. Then we're going to try looking at how to remodel the impact of trying to change the microbiome. And then the bottom line is very simple. Question everything and present your data when you disagree, but present it and disagree. So let's go on to the next step, which is introduction. So what we have on the left is basically what we are looking at. We have a bacteria. The bacteria and the DNA of a person have interactions. Different people will have different bacteria. People at different ages will have different bacteria. People at different genders will have different bacteria. Now the bacteria produces metabolites, which are basically chemicals. The bacteria also consumes metabolites. It also produces something called enzymes, which, if you've done a little bit of chemistry, you realize imaging is something which isn't either produced or consumed, but something that it works like a catalyst. It allows A to be changed to B, but it doesn't get used up. And then the result of all of those metabolites and chemicals floating around the system, combined with personal DNA, may produce a medical condition or a symptom like headaches, upset stomach, psoriasis of the skin, you name it. Basically, the metabolites and the enzymes and the DNA are interacting to produce health challenges for the person. Our root model is, as I showed, pretty simple. Bacteria impacts what gets to the body. Chemicals inhibits or encourages conditions. If a chemical is being starved in the body will alter its behavior and its interaction to do it. For example, classic thing is in World War II, when there was a petroleum shortage, people actually went and started adapting cars to run on coal or cooking oil or other things. Certain microbiomes like mild COVID and other profiles are severe. So there's no you're A or B. It is you may be in this spectrum of things somewhere between 0 and 100 or 110. And so we don't have a clarity in even what conditions they are. It's not that, basically, except for one case, you could be You cannot be a little bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or not pregnant. Almost everything else is on the gradient. You have a cold, maybe a mild cold, maybe a severe cold. Here's the interesting thing. With current studies, we find that just about every single edition has microbiome shifts associated with it. If you're a science fiction fan, you'll probably recognize the word terraforming or terraforma. And that is where the environment which the body is living in, the microbiome, is being altered by the virus or the bad bacteria to produce chemicals which it needs to live better. Hence, it terraforms. So if we are able to unterraform, we make the environment more hostile to the condition or the infection. So that is one of the key aspects of this approach. We are assuming that the shifts are either directly connected with the symptoms or indirectly connected, as in they are lending support to the symptoms. And there are several approaches to modifying the gut microbiome, for example, probiotics, prebiotics, etc. Postbiotics are interventions aimed to introduce beneficial microbial supports through the growth, but it's not using living bacteria. Things like supplements may, in some cases, replace the metabolites which are being produced. For example, one common metabolite is vitamin B12, and taking if your bacteria doesn't produce enough B12, then taking a B12 supplement can moderate the symptoms because you are adding in a chemical, a metabolite which is deficient. You, you also have things like prescription items. For example, an antibiotic is the best example, but other things like proton pump inhibitors may also change the microbiome. And last but more importantly, diet. Diet can encourage certain bacteria and discourage other bacteria. Certain foods in the diet actually have a pretty strong effect on certain bacteria. So we can see where we end up having in our model, we have bacteria, we have a ton of things that could implement it. In some cases, like for supplements, the supplements could literally hop across to being in the system by being dissolved and absorbed to substitute for what certain bacteria produce. Our goal is to normalize the microbiome. Symptoms may ease or disease progression may slow, or in some cases we'll have what we really like to see is remission. The human microbiome is indeed a complex ecosystem with numerous interactions and components. Let's expand on some of these points. Um, First thing is we have over 5,000 common human bacteria. We have a lot more. We have hundreds of thousands of different bacteria which are being identified. But there's about 5,000 which are common in human beings. Some of the oddball ones like typhus, etc., are not common. They can become, it can take up residence in a human and create some real nasty conditions. For example, Lyme disease, typhoid, TB. We also have, or we currently know, remember things are constantly changing as far as research done. We have about 3,000 different enzymes being produced by these 5,000 bacteria. Not one enzyme coming from one bacteria, but dozens of enzymes coming from each bacteria. So it's a 1 to N relationship. And these enzymes and the bacteria produces about almost 19,000 different chemicals, which are either produced or consumed or both. In other words, we have a whole bunch of things which are in play at one time. And the bacteria you will find, generally you'll find names often, for example, Firmicutes, Bacteroides, and Centiobacteria, and more names. So you may find yourself becoming skilled in Latin pronunciation before you know. And the basically all the stuff interaction, and the interactions are not in nice, clean, isolated channels. They are all over the place. Basically, it's it is like a network design, network database. So A goes to B to C, and C goes to B to A, etc. So everything is jumping all over the place. Metabolites are often products of other metabolites. For example, a bacteria will take some chemicals like a glycerate and produce a bacteriorian from it. If the first one doesn't happen, the second one doesn't get produced. So we end up having lots of back and forth that way. More importantly, bacteria often produces bacteriocins, which are basically antibiotics against other bacteria. So if you don't have much of one bacteria, it may cause other bacteria to overgrow because it's not being kept in check by the natural antibiotics. So there is a complex thing. Think of the gut like a city where there are a bunch of gangs operating, and the gangs are going to be busy keeping each other in check, and if one of the gang gets diminished, then the other gangs will take over. Whether it's a good gang or a bad gang is to be determined overall, but it's the same type of complicated problem because we are dealing with effectively a population of individuals. Probably the average person has more individuals in it than there are people in New York, a lot more. So the result is you have more complicated interaction, more clicks, more liaison between them, just absolutely delightful complexity. Now, when we try to modify things, things are complex. Various factors can influence the constitutional function. Research has shed light on some of the intricate relationship between diet, probiotics, medications, and the gut microbiome. Every food we consume can affect multiple bacterial species in the gut. For example, healthy plant-based amino are associated with higher level of bacteroids and firmicutes. Fiber-rich foods generally increase microbiome biodiversity, promote for beneficial bacteria like bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. Resistance charge influence the proliferation of specific bacteria, for example, bacteria and Pneumococcal. Those names you'll get to know, but right now it's just names, which is fine. We also have probiotics. Probiotics can impact many beneficial species and overall bacterial composition. A common one is Lactobacillus GG, which leads to increasing frequency and number of enterococcus stains. Probiotic humans can increase microbiome evenness and enhance enzymatic pathway involved in carbohydrate metabolism. Some bacteria, like Bifidobacterium animis, subspecies lactis, can increase levels of potential butyrate bacteria. Now, when we go over to prescription drugs, we find that many common medications have been found to affect multiple bacteria in the gut. For example, proton pump inhibitors and metformin, antibiotic, and actually show the strong association with microbiome association. Proton pump inhibitors are associated with increased gastronomic intestinal tract bacteria and fatty acid production. Metformin correlates with a higher level of E. coli, which most of you know or believe is a nasty. It's not all of them. Some of them are nasty, but not all of them. Antibacteria can decrease the relative balance of the beneficial bacteria, for example, on the Bifidobacterium species. The effect of these modifiers on the gut microbiome can vary significantly. Individual response to dietary intervention probiotic medication can differ due to factors such as based on microbiome composition, genetics, and environmental influence. A very simple case is often people who are taking some prescription drugs are told not to take grapefruit juice. Why? Because grapefruit juice contains an enzyme P450, which, if you're taking it, alters or totally disables the ability of the drug to do its job. In other words, it just mucks things up. So we have interaction between the microbiome and other things. Now, very, very small number of these enzymes are available as supplements. For example, most of the B vitamins are available, but there are many which are not. Some are definitely, like for example, alcohol is one of them, which of course most of you probably know is very, very available and frequently will cause problems with excessive consumption because it will change the microbiome and sometimes promote disease and other medical conditions. Um, this highlights the complexity of directly manipulating the microbiome through supplementation and underscore the importance of a holistic approach to microbiome moderation, such as dietary intervention and carefully selected probiotic treatment. In conclusion, modifying the gut microbiome is a complex process involving multiple interconnected factors. Understanding these integrated factors is crucial for developing effective strategy for developing gut health and overall well-being, which is the goal of this whole project. Now, at this point in time, you say, okay, that's nice, it's complex. Help! I don't want to, I mean, it's an impossible problem to solve, would be often the first impression. Well, solvability is demonstrated. We have a free citizens science site, microbiomeprescription.com, which is something I wrote, which has demonstrated the feasibility very well. It works, and it works quite well. Our goal is to produce a better solution. We have access to that, but if we want a company that owns intellectual property, etc., we can't just use that. We want to go and create our own solutions. Taking advantage that we can access that data for developing our own solutions, but we still have to produce our own solution in order to have our own intellectual property, etc., which are the key factors for every startup. Startups want to have intellectual property and exclusivity. That is what gives them value. The free sites simply demonstrate it's possible. It has shortcomings. It has many shortcomings to it. And so we are trying to produce a better one. The microbiome prescription site has shown promising results in several large-scale data collection. And think sites like the American Gut Project, which is a precursor to microbiome prescription, collected samples from 15,000 from 11,000 people across 45 countries and did produce some preliminary results. What we have is we have diverse sample analysis, we have correlation with health conditions, and those things we can link over to specific health conditions like malaria, ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, autism. Personal recommendations are produced. And the site produced immediate feedback for the site by doing shortcuts. It makes a bunch of shortcuts which are not the best. Hence the desire to have a better solution, a more correct solution. And it does also demonstrate cross-validity. That is, it does allow suggestions for some conditions to be cross-validated against studies. In other words, the site will suggest you take A, B, C, and D, and then when you check the literature, you find A, B, and D, but not C, which is not mentioned. A, B, and D actually help or reported in studies, clinical studies, to help the conditions in real people. The fact that we have agreement based with the suggestions being based only on the microbiome, and then independently we find a person's condition, and when we take them together, we find that there is a matchup, a correlation between the suggestions and what has helped that condition from independent studies. In other words, we are doing very strong form of cross-validation. We do have continuous model improvement happening with microbiome prescription, and you will also be having model prediction happening over time. Nobody has the answer. Microbiome prescription actually uses the Monte Carlo model. It generates a ton of different algorithms, and then it aggregates them to come up with the most probable suggestions. That can be improved, or we can add more algorithms to even get more Monte Carlo simulation there. And what we do is we integrate a lot of information. So let's go on and take a look at some of the stuff we're doing. Further, let's hop back to your world, the world of information technology. There are many, the analogy of comparing the human microbiome to IT issue and somebody is like somebody in computer from salvage park is quite apt. The comparison highlights complexity and challenge involved in understanding the microbiome. And let's expand on the analogy of the microbiome as a computer system. We have a massive number of parts, just like the microbiome consists of trillions of microorganisms with at least 5,000 common bacterial species. We have a lack of comprehensive documentation. So we have parts, we have a chip sitting there, and you see the chip number on it, but you have no information, repeat, no information on what the chip does. Their job is to assemble a working PC board. That means you have to see what you can find out about it. The lack of comprehensive documentation for just bundle of salvage chips and for the microbiome are the same painful problem. Many microbiome in the human body are unknown or pretty understood. In fact, sometimes for some particular strain, if you search all the available literature in the world, you find there are 6 papers on that particular strain. And all 6 papers don't indicate how to change it or what it does beyond identifying that this is how you identify it and this are some of the chemicals it produces. That's it. In other words, welcome to a big pile of scavenged parts and you're asked to build a computer from it. So now, as with the computer system, a malfunctioning component can affect the entire system. So we have, just like the imbalances in microbiome system, microbiome impact the whole system. So we need to be careful. We have an optimization challenge. We have to achieve optimal performance in both the computer from the salvage parts and from the microbiome. And that requires careful balancing and fine-tuning of various elements. Let's go on and see. So, what bacteria is there? Well, let's take a look at it. Let's some of the possible parts in our package of substrate. We could have different CPUs at 6502, which is a 8-bit operating, a Z80, 8-bit, 8086, 80. We could have 6800, which is 16-bit. We could have 32-bit. We could have a BCM 2835, which is what is used in the Pi computers. Some are 8-bit, 16, 32, 64, and I think there are probably some 128-bit chips around, but those have not become popular yet. We have different operating systems which we're being asked to put on, and one is Android, iOS, CP/M, which is something I grew up with, Unix, which I was programming before the first version of Unix came out, MS-DOS. We also have different languages which we could have to use on the computer. We have Rust, we have Go, we have assembly, but assembly for 6502 and assembly for a 68,000 are different assembly language. We could have COBOL, we could have Fortran, we could have APL, a programming language. I was programming in that back in 1968. And I loved it, but it's also an interesting challenge. Pascal, which is a classic one for teaching, and basically another classic one for teaching. But if we look over at the microbiome, and we get a digital file from a analysis which looks at the RNA in the sample. So we have taken the organic substance and converted it to a digital file. Well, we take that digital file and we process it through different microbiome analysis system, and you will get 97 different answers as to what is there. One will say, oh, you have just bacteria, then one will say you have none of just bacteria. One will say you have 80% of just bacteria, then one will say you have 10%, the same bacteria. Same piece of digital data is going to both systems. And why is it? Because the systems are based on trying to match patterns. And the patterns aren't 100% matches. If you went for 100% match, you maybe get 2% of the bacteria identified. So they do best guesstimate. They are basically trying to do what I tend to term the word fuzzy matching. You're trying to say, okay, which one of these combinations is the closest match, and that's the match we're going to call it. Depends on what your matching patterns are, and there are tons of different matching patterns out there in the real world. Problem is, we have different answers from different processing things, which basically ends up being almost like different operating systems or different languages. Just a generally nasty problem. Next, we can over to the question which I hinted at prior, which is how to measure how much you have of a bacteria. Do you detect any? And it's something like performance measures on your um, homebrew computer. You can have the question about what is the screen refresh rate, what is the resolution on the screen they will support, how much memory does it use, um, and the memory they get used for doing the same thing would depend on what language you're working on, what OS wants CPU, how long does it take to execute. You've got a slow CPU, it may take a long time. You are dealing with an interpreted language, it may take a long time. You're dealing with assembly code optimized for the CPU, it will go very fast. How fast is the clock speed of the CPU? Oh, can you overclock it? Oh, yes, you can overclock it. 15 minutes later, your CPU is dead, is burned out. And the key word is no significant standardization in the microbiome world. Every single one, every single lab that does analysis is basically a homebrew PC system made from salvaged parts. Horrible, horrible situation. That is the reality we are having to deal with. The technology of upgrading a homebrew PC to fix the microbiome is apt and can be extended and expanded on using a microbiome as a complex computer system motherboard analogy. The microbiome can be used as a motherboard serving as a foundation for various physiological processes. Different bacterial species present various components on the motherboard. Metabolic pathways are like circuits connecting these components, and the overall function depends on the proper interaction of all parts. Overclocking, if we try to overclock the microbiome, for example, getting too much of a bacteria, which is thought to be good, can, by, for example, the excessive use of probiotics or drastic dietary change can lead to imbalances. You may obtain your goal of getting more of something, but it knocks everything out of whack. Too much of certain good bacteria may be associated with overgrowth of some health conditions. For example, Akkermansia low is seen in diabetes, but Akkermansia high is seen in Parkinson's. Akkermansia is generally viewed as being a good bacteria, but depending on your condition and how much you have, it can contribute to Parkinson's or it can reduce diabetes. Overall growth of beneficial bacteria can disrupt the delicate balance there. You probably have heard the keywords lactobacillus and bifidobacterium and probably have the image. They're good. They're good. You want them. Wrong. They can be good, and for many people they are good. But there are many serious conditions where, like for example, autism, where both of those are sky high, and those are part of the problem. Lactobacillus sky high will often cause brain fog and a bunch of other cognitive impairments. So there is no easy thing. So, and we also have things like compatibility things. If we are with a PC, we can say, oh, we'll go and give it 4 gigabytes of DIMM5 memory, and it happens to be Apple II. There's no place to install it. Even if you install it, you're going to have a nightmare of trying to make use of it, especially since an Apple II adjusting space is only 64K. There's no way you can make use of 4 gigabytes of memory unless you somehow do some magic and make that 4 gigabytes of memory the equivalent of a rather big floppy drive. If a bacteria are missing to process something, for example, a particular prescription drug, there's no effect that will happen. So we have the same type of parallelism. We also have things like appropriate power supply. You plug your system into a 220 volt 50 cycle power, and the components aren't designed for that. you could result with a rather warm motherboard. Example in the microbiome things are milk allergies, lactose intolerance, nut allergies, sensitivity to histamine producing foods. Um, you have a ton of things which are challenging. Sudden dietary change can overwhelm um, the existing microbiome community. Generally, we advocate a gradual change, upgrading the immune system incrementally, modifying the microbiome to become gradually to allow for adaptation and to figure out what is going wrong. Every person is individual. Each person's microbiome is unique and requires tailored intervention based on individual microbiome profile. So there is no, oh, this is a cure. There are no snake oil cures here. Nothing is universal. It's person by person, which is why we have to work from a person's actual microbiome sample. And we also have to do regular monitoring to see about the aspect. Basically, we want to keep a holistic perspective, considering the entire microbiome ecosystem rather than focusing on a single species or intervention. This analogy highlights the complexity of microbiome moderation and the need for careful individual approach to optimizing gut health and overall health-being. Bottom line, we want to take care with assumptions and simplification. If in doubt, ask. The complexity of the human microbiome necessitates a cautious approach when making assumptions or oversimplifying intervention. This principle is crucial for several reasons. Individual variability. Each microbiome is unique, influenced by factors such as genetics, diets, environment, and lifestyle. Somebody who's working a night shift and keeps changing has a different microbiome as somebody who is a monk in a monastery and have a very relaxed lifestyle. We have complex interaction. Microbiome integrated relationship between cells in the microbiome and the host. Things like stress or anxiety will cause chemicals to go into the system. Those chemicals will make it into the microbiome. Those chemicals will also send false signals to the microbiome, which causes the microbiome to say, oh, we don't need this anymore, we need more of this. What earlier referred to as terraforming. Terraforming are signals coming from the body, chemicals from the body, which telling bacteria to do more production or less production. There's something called quorum sensing, which is the bacteria will adjust itself if there's too much or too little of something. It senses how much is there, it does measurements, and then adjusts its behavior for what it produces. In some cases, some bacteria will go from producing a particular metabolite to consuming a metabolite, depending on what is in its environment. In other words, it tries to quote, normalize things by consuming or producing and happens to have capacity for both. Other bacteria don't have that. Other bacteria are victimized by it. So we are dealing with evolving science. Understanding the microbiome is rapidly changing with new discovery frequently challenging previous assumptions. And that means, oh, I thought that was how it works. No, it doesn't. That's why we end up, as part of our goal, having to build data harvesting tools to read all the latest studies to keep current on everything. We cannot rely on memory. We have to rely on scanning literally millions and millions of papers and a few thousand every week in order to keep our knowledge current and be able to do the best possible suggestion. We often use the term fuzzy logic, which actually means using probability. Fuzzy simply as in we're not definite 0 or 1. We are somewhere between 0 volts and 1.1 volts. We may be 0.5, 0.45, 0.2, etc. So we dealing with probability. Some of you which are old timers may know that from working with physical circuits before our integrated circuitry came along, where you literally had to adjust capacitors and resistors to tune in the radio station. And that I would call is fuzzy logic. We're using probability to adjust things not based on absolute 0, 1 or a definitive number. but on a real number, which is a probability. And what we're trying to do is improve the odds as much as we can. It is something which is used in machine learning to some degree, although it's not called fuzzy logic, it's called machine learning, but it does the same type of pattern. We look making use there. But if in doubt, ask. Encouraging questions and seeking expert advice is essential in this field. Consult with any professionals who are working with it, especially microbiome specialists, when considering how to build something. Stay informed about the latest research and guidelines simply because you want to be able to have business knowledge. Not just pure programming. Pure programming means somebody has to define things and explain to you in programming terms exactly what you have to do. Well, I will try doing that to some degree, but my job becomes easier if you understand what is going on than if you are depending on me having to enumerate in detail what exactly that means, because there's a massive amount of nuance there, and I don't think you want to listen to me for 40 hours a week in order to figure out how to code one line of code. A couple of things to watch out for is it works for me syndrome, which is and anecdotal evidence can often be misleading. Frequently, you come across single case studies showing something works. That isn't what we're wanting. We are wanting to establish good probabilities. Um, what worked for one individual may not work for the other, which is why our general attitude is these are things which are probably likely to help. Give a person a list of 20 items and ask them to do as many of the list as they feel comfortable, which works for them, and then try to identify which ones works and which ones done by rotating, bringing things in one at a time, taking things out one at a time, and seeing what actually cause effects. And in some cases, if it's something which is known to have an antibacterial effect, rotate, rotate, rotate to prevent antibiotic resistance and mutations. We do have often problems with placebo effect when we are dealing with it, because people will believe it and they'll get better. And sometimes the reason they get better is very simple. It reduces their anxiety. Anxiety produces chemicals, and if those chemicals get reduced, the microbiome gets better. We've done absolutely nothing directly. What we have done is reduce anxiety, and that is a valid medical treatment. We also want to try working with large sample sizes, and most studies are unbelievably small sample size. I know why, in terms of statistics, why they often end up being at a small size, because that is what one of the stats probably said, okay, you can get statistical significant if you have sample sizes of 30, which is true for some type of studies. When we're dealing with the microbiome, you don't have the joy, so it's not the same situation. You don't, a sample size of 30 may get you one or two significant, and that's it. We will, as you will see, deal with much larger data sets. Okay, things, as a reminder, things to keep in mind is there are cofactors to be considered in building models, such as age, diet, and health status, and medication use in that. So those are all factors that we need to try incorporating in our computer programming. So, and some cases like age, from 0 to 70. Wait a minute, somebody is a low 70, somebody is an old 40. Somebody has diabetes, somebody is not. Somebody has high blood pressure, but it's normative in an older person, and it's abnormal in a younger person. So basically, we use a probabilistic approach to microbiome intervention, and we try to calculate things which has the best beneficial aspect. And we use studies from large-scale studies whenever possible. We consider likelihood of success and potential risk when choosing intervention. And we implement implementation with the highest probability of benefit and lowest probability of risk. We have uncertainty of many facts. We do not know, and likely cannot know ever, the facts with absolute definality or information. We are confined to estimates. We have limitation in our knowledge. We have, first the limitation we have is we don't even know if study indicates that this is bacteria A or B or C in one study. We don't know if it is indeed the same bacteria which we are getting from our lab, because, as mentioned earlier, we get 97 different answers using the same physical data, same digital data. So we have uncertainty if a study says this particular um, food, like a goji food, increases lactobacillus. We don't know if it actually increases lactobacillus. It may increase something which is similar to lactobacillus, which got misidentified using the lab processing which they are using. So that is the first thing. Then we go over to the joys of modifier. Oh, here is a probiotic. It simply says Lactobacillus probiotic. We have no idea what strains are in, what species are in there, or what strains are which species. Like each strain of each species has different interactions. So we have a whole bunch of uncertainty involved here. Let's look at some examples. These aren't fictitious examples. I've recently read studies showing the identical same thing. A key word here is in-depth. Many studies are shallow studies. They don't go really down into it. A few are beautifully done. They go into depth. And the in-depth study or the shallow study may report something that modifier M increases bacteria B on average. And the average happens to be statistically significant at a 0.05 or 0.01, or in some cases the same 0.2 probability of it. In other words, 0.2 means it increases it probably with a 80% chance that it does increase it. The P or probability factor is something which is rampant in the system, which probably needs to be captured in the database. But what we have is, when we look at it in depth, we find that study that B increases only if a number of bacteria C is present in significant number for the person before the modifier was given. In other words, the modifier interacts with C, C modifies it, perhaps produce secondary metabolites, which is actually causing bacteria B to increase. Okay, so we have a chain reaction, a cascade, daisy chaining, if you wish. Another details reveal that B decreases only if bacteria is present in significant numbers. Again, bacteria modifier M basically is consumed by bacteria D, and bacteria D produces natural antibiotics, bacterians, against bacteria B. Oops. So, depends if the bacteria C or bacteria D is present in significant enough, depends whether it goes up or down. Looking at everybody on average, it goes up. But for individual people, it goes down in one case and goes up in another case. And if B and C are both missing, there's no impact. It doesn't have any change. And if there's no B, there's no change. How can you measure? How can you have a change to something that doesn't exist? So that is some of the challenges of trying to get the data in. In other words, the data we're getting in will end up becoming logical rules, which may be familiar to some of you who have done expert system or things such as Prolog, which is a good example of it can be used for our expert system. So we end up creating rules, or if you wish, statements. Our statement with the end is the probability of change, or change, increase, or decrease at the end. And most of the studies are done with relatively naive and simplistic view. Often they are microbiologists, they're not statisticians, they're not data scientists. They are often, I literally have heard some of them said, I'm horrible at math. That's why I'm in microbiology, because I'm horrible at math and arithmetic. Well, these are doing studies, and so they are surviving when they try publishing stuff. They have been shown how to calculate significance, and they go and use what they've been taught, and they literally discard the rest of the data which is in front of them because they don't know what to do with. number one biggest problem is small sample sizes hide details. When you have a sample size of 30, you can get significance, but only if you are having major shifts. You may get shifts, but none of them may be particularly significant, or may not make it above something like a 0.01 or 0.05 probability rate. Lack of advanced statistical skills is a common issue I've seen in studies. It just sort of, oh, wait a minute. They never, classic example is, does they mention anything about detecting for false positive or false negatives? If they haven't mentioned that, they haven't, which means that the results could well be false positive or false negatives, which have not been corrected for. And if they corrected for it, there may be no significance at all. Often modifiers are poorly defined. For example, decorations, which are popular in China, is a boiled down mixture of from 3 to 15 different herbs in basically a extract boiled down into a something people take as a drops under the thing. They've been shown to show significant microbiome changes, but you have in this concoction 15 different herbs. If you take apart the herbs, you end up with something like 85 different active compounds at least are involved. So which compound is causing which effect is really what we want to know, so we can be very precise. We don't know. We only know if they take this particular combination of things, then these changes happen, but we have no idea of what causes what. Welcome to an interesting world. Let's take a look at a popular modifier, the Mediterranean diet. And Mediterranean diet varies significantly across different countries and regions around the Mediterranean. So is a Mediterranean diet what they eat around the Mediterranean? Yes, it is, and that's where the concept came from. Unfortunately, it got redefined by North Americans usually into their view of what the Mediterranean diet is. Now, the original Mediterranean diet was detected because of incidents of diseases, life expectancy of people in the entire Mediterranean area. So therefore, what they eat must be good for you. Now it got boiled down to overly simplified there. So the Mediterranean diet varies significantly between different countries and regions, and its modern, usually Western, usually American interpretation often different from traditional eating patterns. Here's a breakdown of the application in different areas: Greece, Spain, and Italy. These countries are considered the core of the Mediterranean diet, where they're with their traditional cuisine closely aligned with the concept of Mediterranean. Israel, while geographically Mediterranean, is not typically included in the classical definition of Mediterranean diet. Morocco, although Mediterranean crunchy, is usually excluded from the traditional Mediterranean diet concept, which primarily focused on southern Europe and generally Italy and Spain. California Health Spa tends to preach a Mediterranean diet, which is, I would call, more a California diet than Mediterranean, and doesn't necessarily reflect the traditional eating patterns of Mediterranean country. The key components lifestyle factors contribute to the health benefit of the Mediterranean diet, including the use of olive oil, but in some cases they don't use olive oil. Italians do. Other areas they use lard and butter. Other areas they use sheep tail fat. Those are the ones who do. Often they are heavy in fish, including eel and octopus. Salmon, which often will be included in a California Mediterranean diet, is a largely unknown fish for them because basically it's not traditionally available to them. So what we have is there, and we also have things like Mediterranean wine consumption, particularly red wines with meal, which contribute polyphenols and other beneficial compounds is common in the traditional Mediterranean diet. Generally, consumption of alcohol is generally discouraged in the California Mediterranean diet for other reasons. High plant based high intakes of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes. Often those are specific ones. For example, eggplant is common in Greece. Um, Often Mediterranean diet rarely uses eggplant. Um, Mozzarella cheese, other particular type of cheese. It's just, oh, the California Mediterranean diet simplifies, oh, cheese, so it doesn't matter any cheese. So we use American cheese, American cheddar cheese, or whatever. No, wait a minute. Traditional uses feta, which actually has particular type of bacteria in it, which isn't in cheddar cheese, and often it's a living bacteria in feta cheese. So we have a whole bunch of things. Lifestyle things is different. Anybody who has spent any time living in Spain or Italy knows that afternoon siesta are the norm. Excuse me, that's not preached in California Mediterranean diet, where it's go, 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 and especially if you're working for an IT company until you put in a 16-hour day, then you go home, you collapse, and you come back the next day. You on Sundays and Saturdays. So there are horrible differences, and that Mediterranean diet will often be preached and used in studies. And the question is, what was it? What did they actually do to the Mediterranean diet? What parts of it did they do it? So it is what I call what could use fuzzy. It's a vague definition of a modifier, and that is a commonly preached definition of a modifier. Um, so the benefits of the Mediterranean diet, which are likely connected to a bunch of things which are not captured in the North American Mediterranean or the California Mediterranean diet. Unfortunately, but the catch is Mediterranean diet is sort of the extreme, but we have other things to do. For example, eating bread doesn't do it. Wait a minute. It's eating bread. What type of bread? Is it barley bread? Is it rye bread? Is it wheat bread? Is it a sorghum bread? What percentage of things? What a bunch of other things get involved to it, and each one of those minor changes, including is it made with butter or was it made with lard or was olive oil used on it, has an impact on the microbiome. And often those details, those essential details, are lost. And here's the fun: even if they're included, then it becomes even more complicated trying to figure out what to do for suggestions to people, because we have a whole bunch of needles scattered around, and what you want to do is get the needles aligning to point at the direction somebody will be. We don't want all the needles as absolute mess on the floor. We want them to align to a particular thing. Okay, let's take a look at probiotics, just for another example to understand the issue. Often you just see a probiotic bottle saying lactobacillus, or you find a study saying, okay, we provide lactobacillus and things improve. Doesn't say which species of lactobacillus. Here is a case of 1-1 lactobacillus reuteri, and it's made of several different strains. On the diagram on the left, you can see all different strains from different sources. Now, here is catch number one. You go to a store and you buy lactobacillus reuteri probiotics. You have no idea, literally no idea where it came from. It could have been extracted from, excuse me for saying it, a mouse fetuses, or chicken shit, or pig manure, or from humans. We don't know where it's come from unless they identify the explicit strain, and we can find in the literature where that strain originated as the source. This Lactobacillus reuteri is actually some of the species produce a natural antibiotic, others do not. Some produce histamine, which affects allergy, and people who are histamine sensitive will get sick taking it. Other people won't have any effect because they have histamine tolerance. Folate is important B vitamin, and whether or not produced or not. Each of these strains is different. So when we started saying we gave them Alwateri, most 99.9% of the time we have no idea which strain, we have no idea which characteristic it has. All we know is Alwateri does it. So in some ways we don't know what it is. Whether or not it has one or another of those things is basically a random probability event. We could try estimating from here how many of the known strains have produced a return, etc. Or we can hopefully find in the literature a particular that this is one of the strains that does. But then we go and try finding studies using that strain. And we find there are 2 studies. And both of them are very small sample size and don't report on much. This is part of the problem. This is why I refer to the whole thing as we have a gym full of pins which been dropped at random there, and our goal is to try to get magnets to start lining up all the pins pointing in which direction the exit door is. Exit to better life. So it is not trivial. It is an interesting problem, and we end up having to look at some interesting solutions. Fortunately, they are possible because of computers nowadays. Let's take a look at another thing. Something which you probably think, oh, apples. An apple is an apple. No, apple is an apple is the style of saying a past Canadian Prime Minister loves using, but that's not the case. The content of an apple varies by species and growing environment. Not only that, the type of apples on the shelf is not determined by what amount of goodness in it. It's determined by how well it stays on the shelf, how long before it goes spoiled, does it look nice. In other words, pure commercial reason, not health reason. So here we have an example of something like vitamin C content in different types of apples, and we find some are literally 4 to 5 times more vitamin C than other varieties. Which now, vitamin C we know modifies the microbiome. So the question is, if we find that apple causes a microbiome change, is it because of the vitamin C content they're getting, or is it because of something else, or is it a combination of things? We can go down and take a look at other phenolic compounds in different types of apples, and you can see we have again this huge variety of things from one type of apple to another, different chemical mixtures, and again, in some cases, one thing may have double, or for example, epicatrin, which is a well-documented microbiome modifier, we have tenfold differences between 2 different apple varieties. So the result is, if we have a study saying this is the result of doing apples, we are a little bit of fog as to why its mechanism is. We know what it could contain, but we don't know what it actually can contain, and we don't know which of those factors are the likely cause of the microbiome shift, because some cases it may be just one of those factors. For example, turmeric is mainly consists of coumarin, and so you get say with coumarin and turmeric, but you find that turmeric has other substances, and the differences they find for microbiome shifts are different between curcumin, which is about 90% of turmeric, and turmeric, and that is because of the other 10% of substances has other effects, and they were significant enough. So studies are often not given by consumption by body weight. For example, they eat 8 apples a day. Okay, that's nice. What's the weight of the apple? What's the weight of the participant? Is this a 85-pound person or a 250-pound obese person? Again, all that information is really needed if we want to be precise, and because we don't, we end up dealing with impreciseness, with fuzziness, with any one of a dozen terms, which are terms which is, for most computer programs you don't want to hear, because what it means is you have to start calculating probabilities, which are not bad, but it is a skill set, different skill set than usually you're using with programming. Bottom line is everything is fuzzy, everything is imprecise, with fine details being absent often. Moderate details is common, and we have uncertainty of the actual bacteria. Strain level identification is rarely achieved in quantitative studies. A large number of studies will find that many strains and bacteria will be identified. Up to 40% are, in some samples, have been unidentified. Something in the gut, we don't know what they are. We don't have the tools to identify them. 40%. We have no ideas. Yes, this person is better. Is it because of the bacteria which we can identify has shifted, or is it because the bacteria we can't identify has shifted? We don't know. Um, we have the uncertainty of modifiers. Often they are vaguely defined in studies. They are, oh, let's use apples, let's use oranges. Which type of orange? I have no idea. It could be mandarin. It could be a special type of orange from Colombia. It could be a navel orange. We don't know which type of orange is. We don't know. Often the variety is not specified. If it is, all it does is it means we have even more different pins on our gem floor to try sorting out. We have generic antibiotics often have a different impact than the original versions. They are generic as in they have the apparently same chemical formula, but often what happens is is that some cases genetics does what's called a left binding or right binding, um, R dash R glucose versus D glucose, which is how the components are joined with a left twist or right twist to the construction of the molecule. And the difference of twist actually can make a difference in some cases. Most studies report on the average shift, and many of them do not apply significance to subset. They say, okay, we see that the bifidobacterium increase when we give barley to mice. Okay, was a statistically significant increase or not? The studies often won't say anything. If you're lucky and there are appendices to the studies and you have the raw data, you may be able to calculate it. Many times you don't. It is, have fun, folks, have fun. Okay, so next item is one thing we are doing is trying to find symptoms to bacterial association. Why do you want to find associations? Because if we can identify associations, we can identify the bacteria which are likely cause for the symptoms like headaches, like psoriasis, like extreme fatigue, like habitual infections or immune dysfunction or diabetes. If we can identify the bacteria which are involved, then we know which bacteria to focus on changing. Otherwise, we have no idea. We are going to be busy chasing ghosts, chasing or trying to change bacteria which probably are innocent bystanders, which we're trying to lock in jail, or because they just happen to be there and we don't like how tall they are, or the color of their skin, or whatever. So trying to get association is trying to identify exactly what bacteria we are doing it. Now here is the catch: is we have to work with samples in the same lab. Only why goes back to the 97 different answers on the same digital data file using 97 different processing pipelines. All computer programming pipelines, but computer programming pipeline using different reference data sets, using slightly different ways of pattern detections, and hence we get 97 different answers. Other aspect is symptoms and bacterial diagnosis are often not binary. They're often wide ranges. So what we do is we have a bit of fuzziness there too, but we can often, if we're lucky, we can get severity of a symptom diagnosis incorporated and make use of that. Other cases, it's just whether or not a MD or a person thinks they have the symptoms. Never expect normal distribution in anything. Nothing is a bell curve or Gaussian distribution. Nothing works with average and true standard deviation. Doesn't exist. People who are trained in microbiology naively believe that it does exist, at least the way they write their papers, they believe it is. The reality, looking at actual data, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. frequency of detection can be a major clog in doing analysis, as in you find 40% of people in a sample has this bacteria, and those people have more or less than that. So the question is that significant or not? Other cases, we find there are some, I recently read one where a study found that there was nobody in the control group had this bacteria, and 70% of people with the condition had this bacteria. In which case, we know which bacteria to focus on. It's that bacteria because it has a very strong association with the condition. So we have, believe it or not, we have lots of statistical techniques to do it. Not one. We have many, 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 many statistical detection methodologies to set up different machine learning. Basically, every type of machine learning or analysis tool in a modern AI savvy person's programmer toolkit is likely usable. We just have to use them with care so that we get valid results and ideally get statistically significant results. Counts, by the way, are not meaningful. Percentile ranking is meaningful. Why are counts not meaningful? Because one lab from the same physical sample may say you have 2,000 of Lactobacillus reuteri. The same sample processed through a different pipeline may say you have 10 Lactobacillus reuteri. But if you convert it to percentile ranking, where are you compared to other people, it becomes meaningful. If you're in the bottom 5 percentile, that means 19 out of 20 people have more than you do. Chances are, if it's a significant bacteria, you want to increase it. If it's 95 percentile and it's associated with the condition and high levels are associated, you definitely want to decrease it. So percentile ranking is far more meaningful than the physical count. So that is a transformation that basically is inherent into how we use a microbiome prescription discover it. Believe me, it tried every possible way of slicing and dicing the microbiome samples to get results, and percentile became the most meaningful and, more importantly, comprehensively understandable for people. You can say, oh, can you have a count of 2,000 E. coli? And then somebody say, oh, that's a major significant thing. You need to take care of the E. coli. The person who says the 2,000 count is significant is probably blowing smoke, because that 2,000 count may occur, and probably if it's shotgun analysis, actually means the person is at the 2 percentile. 98% of people have more than that person does, and that your health care professional or naturopath is saying that's so high you need to get rid of it, because they don't understand the microbiome. And that is something, unfortunately, you're going to have to get some improved understanding of. Challenge is generally seeing patterns and converting them to actionable items. Items which you can act. You can find a pattern, but can you somehow convert that into a way of doing one of two things? Forecasting if somebody has this particular condition, in which case we go to very classic machine learning algorithm, etc. We do cross-validation. You take 90% of the data, determine the pattern, apply it to the remaining 10% of the samples, and see if it accurately predicts, and then slice and dice to the heart's content. So the mathematics is there. It's again machine learning. It's very much classic stuff. Well, you find that, but we have to do that. We have to do that first of all for detecting patterns, making sure the first thing we want to do is, does our pattern detection work? As in, does it do cross-validation? Not just that we see a pattern, but does the pattern cross-validate accurately? And then once we have the pattern, then we can use the pattern to see whether or not we can make suggestions from the pattern which cross-validate to studies. Use studies of different substances which are done independent of microbiome analysis. A simple example is the chart below. We have one line showing the expected number of samples with a specific percentile and the actual number of people for just one particular bacteria, and you notice they converge, but only at high numbers. At low numbers, they are a significant gap between one and the other. The question is, how to convert the gap to determine whether or not the person has the increase or decrease rate of risk of having whatever this condition is associated. I forget what condition it was for, but this was one condition which ran through analysis and saw this nice distinctive shift pattern. Other cases, the bacteria are in line with everything, so you know that the bacteria are not, this bacteria is not significant, or using this method of measurement is not significant. So there's lots of ways of doing it. Some cases you have to take a look and say, okay, where do things deviate? In this case, you say, okay, if you are the 90th percentile above, it's not significant. If you are below the 90th percentile, your odds are increased. But how do you calculate what the increased odds are? What are the OR statistics for it? So that's one of the goals. Another example here is the example which helps to illustrate why we work with percentile. Top one shows the count. And so see, we have a nice curve going there. Okay, so that's nice and dandy. You could go and do things such as say, okay, what is the median? The median here is the 50th percentile by definition, the median, the one in the middle. But if you calculate the average, you find the average may be sitting at 85%. So if you do the mean plus minus 2 standard deviation, everybody below 50th percentile will be flagged as being out of range low. And nobody who is at the top is going to be deemed to be high. Oops. Could be correct, could not be. But if we do a transformation, a monotonic transformation, so that we actually don't use data, we just rearrange the data, we see what we see here is we see a big region where things are pretty flat. So the result is we see if you are down here at about the eighth percentile or below, things change very dramatically, which means that that is probably a reasonably good point for a low point. And up here, the high point, we see perhaps somewhere around 92 percentile. Things are changing abnormal. Things are changing faster than they will be. Some cases you'll find this line is absolutely flat across the whole thing, in which case, hey, probably there's no statistical significant ranges for this bacteria. Toss it out of consideration. The key is finding these reference ranges. And the reference ranges are many ways of finding them. You could determine every possible reference range you can. Let's say you have 25, and you can go and apply each one of them, create suggestions for each one of them, and then combine all of them using a Monte Carlo model approach, in which case you will get a reasonable result, yes. Limiting them to selective algorithms, you probably get better results. And how do you determine if they're better? It's very simple. When you go over and apply to actual data where we have a condition which is identified a match, and we look at the what we forecast to help the condition, and then see what our independent studies, which are not considered microbiome, helps the condition, and we have high degree of agreement. 90% is what basically I view as a reasonable amount of agreement if the algorithm is tuned. If it's well tuned, it'd be 95%, but we want at least 90% agreement tuning rate. 80% is what often data scientists would be happy with. Now we want to be 90%. Now we need to go for the extra mile because we're dealing with actual human lives here. Okay, and let's take a look at why data must be lab specific. This is all for the same bacteria and calculated by, sorry, the lab should be here, but we see lab high and lab low are calculated using mean and standard deviation. You can see where the different labs, the numbers are all over the place. And you can use box plot line, the same thing here. And if you can take a look lab high and box plot high, you can notice that some cases they are unbelievably huge difference. One case is 84 here, other case it is 2400, 75, etc. Box plot low, etc. Here is 000. Here we actually have there. And we have additional ways, something called count off mole drop. We have different ranges calculated from there. So we have joys of trying to find range when something is significant. And now if we look at things just like whether or not we see it, we see here is a whole bunch of different labs. And this one bacteria, you see Xenogen and foreign or shotgun. You see it detect 93% of the time, 96% of the time. Other labs, which are 16S labs, you see it detect 50% of the time. Oh, 17% of the time. Thrive, which is a popular research lab, just 24% of the time. Ubiome, which was an extremely popular lab one time, only 2% of the time. So 2% of the time it was detected using how 16S uses the data set. 98% of the time when we were using shotgun. Data must always be lab specific. Things are absolutely nightmares there for what things are. So your problem is made simpler because most of the time you'll be using all data from one lab, so you don't have the issues. But it's good to know what the issues are, so you don't naively think that the results of different ranges from a different source can be applied. They can't. You will be creating your own ranges. You cannot borrow ranges from anybody else because they will be, to abundantly, absolutely wrong. Okay, let's do a recap. Bacteria may not be the direct cause of a condition. The body may have overproduction or insufficient production of materials, metabolites, things going into the body. And so we can use data from KJP to find out what compounds are being produced high and low, and we can now from calculating how much compound is produced, we can see if we can get associations from the compounds and the enzymes to that. So we're not only getting association dealing with bacteria, we're getting association dealing with the compounds and enzyme. But here's where the problem is. A particular enzyme may not be available as a supplement. It comes from one to many bacteria, perhaps as many as 200 different bacteria. So now comes the question of, we want to reduce this enzyme, which bacteria do we have to modify to reduce this enzyme? But at the same time, we don't want change those enzymes to shift a different bacteria in the wrong direction. You get a picture? It is trying to do a massive balancing act with what we have: 18,000, 5,000, 5,000, 25,000, 30,000 different factors having to be balanced in a juggling act. Welcome to the world of what's called programming, of the different types called linear programming or non-integer programming. We want to look at the modeling impact of modeling the impact of modifier on microbiome prevents several significant challenges. Then we research for many modifiers. Food study exists for most as potential microbiome modifier. If you say, okay, if I go and eat no, not peanuts. If I eat lots of popcorn, how will my microbiome change? Sorry, you won't find anything. You probably won't find anything. If I eat lots of peanut butter and jam sandwiches, how will the microbiome change? I don't know. If I eat lots of pizza, good example, how will the microbiome change? Wait a minute, is it pizza with just all cheese pizza? Is it a vegan pizza? Is it peas with salami? Which type of pizza? How does each type of pizza modify? Don't have the information. Oh. So do we tell people to eat pizza or not eat pizza? We have a problem there because we don't have any studies on it. True study exists for potential microbiome modifier, making it difficult to draw robust conditions. So we end up with vague or produce fuzzy conclusions, or which we combine with expert system logic to make them a bit better, and we make it even stronger by using Monte Carlo simulation, and it appears to work. The lack of data hinders our ability to understand the full range of effects that various microbiomes may have. We also have an interesting challenge. We have overrepresentation for trendy topics. Whatever is trending topics, people could assign a grad student to do a study for to get published. It's trendy, it's hot. They'd be interested in it. What does that mean? It means we have a lot of particular things out there. We have overproduction of studies on some substances, and we get the same substance reported, the same result reported time and time and time and time and time and time and time. I mean, literally 70 studies reporting the identical same thing in some cases. I know, I've read them. Believe me. The imbalance tends to skew understanding of the microbiome and potentially overlook important but less popular area research. Often things are context sensitive. The effects of modifying the microbiome often depends on various factors, and which includes things like diet. Dietary habits can significantly influence the microbiome. Medical conditions can influence it. Compounding factor as if a person is in a high stress environment. What bacteria are already there? What is the person's DNA? Yes, there is DNA to microbiome association. They have found that, in particularly with genetic twins. They find that yes, and genetic between a classic study from Africa where they find the same village all eat the same thing, all intermarry, etc. But immediately close family has the same specific strains of certain biotic, and it appears to be well identifiable as to being an inherited strain of a bacteria which is literally passed down and is DNA connected. And they've gone so far as trying to put some of these to somebody else in the same village, and those same strains do not take in a quote foreign DNA environment. So now I'm mentioning programming. We're talking about something called linear programming, entry programming, and mixed industry programming. It's a specialized area of operations research or more management science, depending on there. And we end up going in there. And what we end up doing is for every modifier, we end up assigning a value of -1, 0, or 1. 1 means we should be taking it, or the person is suggested to take it. We have -1. The person should probably be avoided because it will cause bacteria to shift in the wrong direction in a significant amount. We have 0. Basically, we have no opinion. We have no idea of what the change will be. So, hey, keep eating your pizza with mozzarella cheese with codfish on top of it, or anchovies. No problem. And the bacteria rates tends, we can identify which bacteria we need to alter. And the question is how much we need to alter it and how much will each bacteria modifier alter it. Well, determining the bacteria weight tends to be a function of how far away is it from the reference point. The bigger the reference point, probably the more concerned we are. If the reference point is 95 percentile and we are in the 96 percentile, the importance of shifting that is probably not as much of something which is at the 99th percentile and the reference point is at the 80th percentile. That's a huge shift. We also want to take in factor into account. Percentile is part of it. We want to know how many of the bacteria are involved, because if it's a bacteria which is very, very underrepresented, the ability to get major change may be inhibited. So we end up having to calculate a rate. We have to create functions and formulas and tune them. We don't know what the magic formula is. So we toss together formulas, run them through, go through the whole process from end to end, see what the results are like, go back and iterate with a different variation of the formula and keep doing it until we get real good results. In other words, in some ways we have to do a machine learning variation on the functions which you're using. And that is something how you should view it. And if you can automate it so that you allow the machine learning to go and modify the whole process that's going from front end to the back end. Let's try this, let's try that, let's try this, let's try this, and enumerate all possibility to come up with the absolute best optimized results, then we are in business and we are happy, and you make me happy. And you have a very, very important proprietary, which of course, which the venture capitalists would love to have done. Um, and the goal is to get a rate of the expected shift, which is probably minimalized. You want the undesirable shift to be minimalized. Getting the quantity of modifier, how many apples, how many whatever, may or may not be easy. In some cases, like for example, probiotics, we have studies, and some of the studies shows what quantity in terms of billion community forming unit BFCUs, you'll get that term well, were effective or not effective for changing the microbiome in a clinical study, which then gives us a quantity. So there are some quantities available, which means it becomes a take, and here's a minimum quantity you should have, and then we often will have a maximum quantity, which is whatever is deemed to be the maximum safe quantity for something, and somewhere between the minimum shown effective in some circumstances to the maximum is the range. Sometimes there is no quantity hints available. Extracting those quantities, and that information is part of our ongoing data extraction things. Down below we have the mathematical statements, and there's all sorts of different ways of stating it. So I'll leave you to get up to speed with basic programming, because how you code it would depend on what language you're doing it, etc. But again, we are in one sense want to have a automated machine learning that calculates out all sorts of different methodologies for computing reference range. B, apply these reference range to our samples to determine suggestions. From the suggestions, see which cross-validated, and then we want to have the best performance across the whole system. And if you automate it from the front end to the back end, we are happy. But the first step before we automate it is just be able to do each level manually, and then we worry about automating from A to B to C to D to E, as well as doing all the automated cross-validation. Very doable problem, not your typical programming problem where you're told to add accounts receivable to accounts payable minus this, which is real easy to do. Here you are having to do machine learning, data science. You have to do a whole bunch of advanced computational techniques in order to come up with a collection of algorithms, keyword collection of algorithms that will do the objective. And the objective goal is to make suggestions that have a high probability of significantly improving somebody with a symptom or with a condition. Final takeaways is simple. Microbiology do not oversimplify or assume definality. Um, Ranges and significance vary by lab. We are only going to be working with a single lab there, but when you're reading studies, be aware that what the lab is saying and what you are going to get may differ. We're going to assume, because we have no other choice, that's the case. However, when we are working with our own samples, which have been annotated by the person who has and whose sample has been taken, annotated with their metadata as to what symptoms they have, we are in a much healthier situation, because now we have symptom to bacterial identification being correct for our lab. Condition reality labeling is often subjective by the MD or the person. We are generally going to be working with self-declared symptoms, because most of the time the MD will not go through the rigorousness of all the tests required to make a formal textbook definition. And even if they did, then a number of people who will get that is a fractional number of people who are going to be submitting labs. Often they would say, oh, it looks like you got SIBO. Okay, well, they declare SIBO because of the breath test. The breath test has about like 80% false positive. So that's really making things subject to, there is a definitive test, which is actually going in and taking a sample from the small intestine, which is a surgical procedure,
That is the gold standard. That's about 98% accurate. But practically no MD will do that, and it's expensive. It costs, and most people will rather go with, oh, okay, I think you have soluble. It gives them a plausible answer, so they will self-declare they have soluble, even though they may not. But what we end up doing is we find association in the bacteria which are associated with people with self-declared soluble. Soluble being small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And compound conditions are common. Compound conditions being I have mast cell activation syndrome, I have histamine intolerance, I have irritable bowel syndrome, I have chronic fatigue syndrome, I have psoriasis, I have uh, I have diagnosis of Lyme disease, I have cognitive dysfunction, I have sleep apnea. All of that would be the person's metadata, which means we have compound conditions in the metadata for the persons who we have a microbiome from. In other words, we have complexity right, left, and center. The catch is, I've demonstrated we can solve this problem. Not easy, not trivial, and you have to be flexible in terms of how you think about solving it. Modifier impacts are pretty studied for both impact and what they are and what is the active component. If you're dealing with a herb or other things and multiple things, if you're dealing with multiple compounds in a herb, which one is the one who's doing it? If you're dealing with probiotics, which strain or which species is it? Um, and our solution is using mathematics. We use mixed integer program, probability, fuzzy logic, expert systems, all multiplication fit into multi-color simulation. We often will be using machine learning and other AI techniques throughout the system. And the solution depends on accurate and current data, which is why data, textual, I won't say data mining. Okay, yes, it is data mining, as in getting statements, logical statements, which could be converted into something like Prolog from published studies on an ongoing basis is critical by automation, by textual analysis. And by that, I mean we want a statement saying that, what is a good example? The nootropic paracetam improves cognitive function with a 0.9 with a probability of 0.001. The nootropic paracetam decreases enterobacteria with a probability of 0.05. Those are statements. So those are statements we could write out as a sentence, or we can convert them into symbolic logic, or into a prologue statement, or into a data record in a database or data store, depending on when you prefer database, data store, or non-SQL storage, or SQL-based storage, or whatever. So we have a whole bunch of things we can do. We do have a non-trivial coding issue. Okay, I keep mentioning microbiome prescription because microbiome prescription is what I ended up writing, which ended up demonstrating as possible. Microbiome prescription is a public citizen science site, and it's not going to be ever become the exclusive property of any company. The information is available to companies in the context of being able to use its data for them to develop their own algorithm and their own data, but everything they have to produce themselves so that they can own the right. If they bought things from microbiome prescription, then basically we are talking into a licensing conditional use scenario, which is why your job is critical. It is to develop your own particular breed of algorithms there. Let's take a look at manually created facts are ones which I hate to say it, which I have looked at and manually entered, explicitly saying this substance changes this bacteria to be higher or lower, and here is a link to the study where I'm getting information from. I need to get the source, I need to get what is changing, what the condition, or it could be diabetes is connected, or let's say eh, Parkinson's is connected to akromencia. It is high. Here's a study. And there may be 25 statements like that with 25 different studies being there. So 97,000 studies are being manually entered, and I expect probably to breaking 100,000 within the next month or two. Believe me, it's a slow process. I've done automation to a large degree of getting that to be able to automate the data entry. And that's one of the key things is you really want to automate that because every week I have literally hundreds of things I have to manually review. I will not tell you how many studies I've read through. Actually, I do have information on how many hours processed, and it is a rather ugly number. Citations, basically how many studies had useful, meaningful information, 17,900. So that is 17,900 studies, which should definitely go through whatever mechanism you set up for data text batch. You have lots of data. Bacteria modifier, I have a relatively small number. Basically, it was which was most commonly cited in the beginning. I've added it up to about 1900. Reasonable number is probably be closer to 3,000 because there's a whole bunch of things I haven't done. And I keep coming across an issue or other cases I've aggregated a whole bunch of things into one. Like there's just a bunch of things I have aggregated into one for simplicity, but they should actually be kept separate. Cake factor produced by bacteria, enzyme compounds are about 5,000 different ones in database. There are 18,000 enzymes, but only 5,000 produced by the common human bacteria. Biome site, which is where I do most of the site, has been very cooperative over the years, and the result of it, we have over 4,000 samples processed through their pipeline, of which probably 40 to 50% of them have annotated metadata there, which means that that is where I've been able to demonstrate that we can get associations and we can get accurate forecasts done, literally accurate forecasts of what a person has based on the microbiome, which when they upload, they go over and they see these are the things you probably have. They go and they click the ones they actually have. And when you get 80% of the top dozen items being checked on a new person, you know you have good cross-validation. And then we have modifier impact, which are inferred, which uses fuzzy logic statement, which is the study up above may say that Lactobacillus reuteri increases um, 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 Trexmonia. The logic, fuzzy logic statement is not Lactobacillus reuteri increases. It will say that Lactobacillus, which is the species it belongs to, increases the substance, but we give it a diminished rate. So we say, oh, 0.2 instead of 1 for the amount of increase it has. So these fuzzy logic statements help us cover where we have data gaps. We may not have anything about what modifies um, a bacteria, a specific strain of bacteria, but we do have information on what modified the species. So we make an inference that whatever modified modify the species, modify the strains, whatever modifies the genus is logical to modify the species. So we are doing inferences there. And with what the above data, we end up with 2.3 million logical statements which are fed into the forecasting model. So that gives you an idea of the scale of data which are needed to be dealt with. So it's a good thing. And the catch is all of the data, most of the data actually have to be done by data extraction, which is a major part of the project. So that's basically it. Thank you. I'm over on the West Coast, just by Seattle, where any good ex-Microsofty or ex-Amazon tends to live. My phone number if you're desperate, or you can drop me a email address, search Microbiome Prescription, or I would strongly suggest you get familiar with the Microbiome Prescription website. There is a demo login on that site, and that demo login will allow you to play around and see what's going on there and get you a feel for things. Okay, so at this point in time, I'm going to say that's it, folks. The next video will be coming, and it's going to be far more technical. It's showing how do we go about things and what are the components and what do we need to do, and things like timelines, Kanban charts, all the usual IT stuff. So that's coming shortly. And with that, I say adieu and bye.